Hello and welcome to the Cuyamonga Institute, our Q&A conversation for exploration series. I'm Paul Rivera, the Executive Director and President of the Institute. And today we are taking a little bit of different approach than usual. Number one is you may have noticed that my beautiful wife, Laura Lee, is not sitting at my side. I brought in Todd Van Poel, anthropologist, chair of the anthropology department at the University of Missouri, to join in and be my co-host. We'll be having a fun discussion. The Cuyamonga Institute itself is an independent nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience, following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And our focus is reflected in three main areas: experience, education, and exploration. So we continue to respect the path of academic balance, the creative pursuit of science, while advancing, conserving, and restoring a direct experience of that deeper human connection to all of life. And it's part of our mission to expand our own experiential research with the multidisciplinary understanding that's available to us today. So we see ourselves as an educational institution, and we take an open approach. And we created these Sunday roundtable discussions to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration. And that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. So today we want to address the topic and the archetype of the sacred masculine. And as we look around for the other aspects and how that path of the sacred impacts us as men, and how it defines us, and what it does mean for us to follow that path, and whether there are so many questions. But first, I wanted to, first of all, introduce a few of the panel members that are going to be talking to us. And you'll notice, like I mentioned, my beautiful wife won't be with me this morning, but I'm so happy to have Todd Van Poel. Todd, you are the chair of the Department of Anthropology at the University of Missouri. You teach courses such as anthropology of gender, anthropology of war, and along with your wife, Christine, you do research on cross-cultural patterns and its use in trance-based religious experiences. And you've been frequent guests on our program. We have probably, I don't know, with Christine, probably 7 or 8 presentations, and 3 or 4 with you as well, a full variety of topics, but mainly related to trance states, the experience of this alternate reality and how it's been documented down through indigenous cultures, as well as we see the experience in today's world. So,
thank you. It's great to be here, and we've been spending a couple days here with Laura and with Paul. It's been wonderful. One of the things I like about being in the Southwest is I developed what I call my old man tan, which is where I wear a hat and my face gets tan, but my scalp stays white, and it's like a farmer's tan except on your head. I love it. So it's always fun to have that. It means I've been having fun out in the field.
So, well, yeah, and we've also been working, we just recently went to the Neuro Lab at the University of Missouri to do some research on the experiences that are happening during the ritual trance posture work that we are familiar with, and we are the ones who teach and make available based on Dr. Goodman's work. That's another discussion, another time. But yeah, that's something that we're also looking forward to.
Absolutely, lots of good stuff, and the Cuyamonga Institute is doing some really interesting research and doing some great stuff.
Well, I also want to bring into the conversation our good friend David Elkington. Now, David, I'll read your official bio, but I'll also talk about you personally here. Independent mythologist, historian, author of The Ancient Language of Sacred Sound. His research includes the examination of ancient religions, mythology, symbols, iconography. Known for his work on the Jordan-led codexes, which is the earliest known initiatory Christian documents. He's lectured at Oxford and Cambridge, but more importantly, he's lectured here at this program. And we've been known David for, I guess, going on 30 years, that we've been having conversations way back into the late 90s. And we've had this ongoing friendship and this exploration together. So welcome, David.
Hi, yeah, it's good to be here. It's great to see everybody as well. And what can I say? A patriarchal program. Oh, I've been waiting for this.
Don't hate us. Yeah, we need to have a conversation. Well, you know, the Institute, I will say that the Institute itself has always been about exploration, but also about transformation and that experiential aspect to it. So when we start talking about men and the cliches of men and the sacred masculine, but also the idea of toxic masculinity and all those different things that are on the table nowadays, we need to have some new dialogue and continue moving forward. We know that the sacred feminine, the goddess information and knowledge is really widely being distributed and understood more and more each day. It's amazing the amount of traction that it's gotten. And so it's time for us to go back to the idea of where do we fit in and how does the sacred masculine support that? What is that yin yang? What is that balancing energy? And so that's sort of where we should start.
Yeah. So just kind of thinking about it, when we talk about the sacred masculine, there are kind of two different components we could think about. We've got the yin and yang, the sort of the idea of feminine and masculine energies that are present within each of us and that have some sort of balance. But there's also the sacred masculine in terms of the individual who is involved in sacred events, sacred aspects of culture. So, for example, the Kachina dancer, who's always male, or other males who are involved in sacred activity. That's part of the sacred masculine as well. So we've got the idea of these powers, however we might define them. We also have the idea of the individuals, and both of those are worthwhile exploring here. And I think that's kind of our plan for today.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I just noticed that Frank has joined us. Frank is our third panel member, or fourth, I guess, counting myself. Frank, are you there? You turn on your mic.
Hey, buongiorno, everybody.
Buongiorno. So Frank is the author of May I Be Frank, both a book and an entire documentary film about finding health, happiness, love, redemption, transformation. He says he describes himself, what happens when Tony Soprano meets Deepak Chopra? That's how people describe my story. They might want to throw in some Woody Allen and there's a dash of Hunter S. Thompson. Frank's a natural educator, empowering people to explore their own healing while restoring a path of balance and self-love. That's the Frank that I love. So Frank, welcome, and glad you're here. Glad you could get on today.
Thank you. It's always wild when somebody describes me, am I that? Really?
Yeah.
I don't think about it.
Well, you're such a.
Thank you for the such a gracious introduction.
Yeah, well, it's well deserved. So back to the discussion here now that we got Frank on as well. So coming back to the concept of sacred masculine, I'm going to throw it to you first, David. Can we give us some definitions? I mean, the word sacred, is it being an overused term? I mean, how does that fit in? What do you think?
I think that it's not an overused term at all. I think it's a highly misunderstood term.
Okay.
Because, as you know, in the past 40 years or so, the emphasis has been on the feminine. And I'm glad for that because, I'm masculine. I'm highly attracted to the feminine, both outside and inside, I have to say.
Yes.
But the problem is that the masculine has been, I think, to a certain degree, purposefully misinterpreted in order to allow the feminine to make its necessary breakthroughs. But it seems to me that now we do need to understand exactly who we are, where we are, because otherwise we're in danger of becoming emasculated. And that's a big problem now, because I'm going to crack a joke, this morning I unwoke up. And what I mean by that is that, I'm a chap, I'm white, I'm perceived as middle class. Oh, you're the enemy. And what I mean by that is the sense that, all the studies have kind of coalesced around the whole idea of masculinity, and suddenly we're the target. And we've got falling demographics, internationally speaking. The male sperm count has declined incredibly since the end of the Second World War. And, we're feeling kind of like a bit sort of hemmed in terms of our identity and who and what we are. And you kind of think, right, okay, we need to have a bit of a rethink here, because at the end of the day, I deal in the fields of ancient religions, and of course, my speciality is not just Egyptian religion, but also the origins of Christianity.
Yes.
But the focus in Christianity has been to remove the feminine. And my gripe with that is that if you remove the feminine, you end up with something totally illogical.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ancient Greeks would say God without goddess is spiritual insufficiency. And so what do? Oh, we'll bring back the feminine, but she's kind of like a lamppost that we can all sit down and pray to. But we're the chaps, we're going to take over. But look at the Vatican. Look at the whole heap of it. It's basically the world's biggest what can I say, denier of femininity. And I'm not having a go. I'm not denying that aspect of it. But the problem is it's created a massive imbalance to my mind, because it's still pussyfooting around the whole idea of what is feminine. And it's trying to see the feminine from the, as the exterior rather than what's on the interior. And I can see that with a lot of, it wants to see the feminine inside. And we haven't yet determined, what that balance is and how we cope with it. And I think that's tragic, actually. I really do. Because this is where we're coming to now. We need to find our identity. But by the same token, again, a personal viewpoint, I find a lot of modern Western, UK, American culture to be too and overly testosterone fueled,
right,
brainless, reliant on bullets and guns, and actually completely afraid of trying to understand exactly what being a chap really is. Okay. And I use the word chap on purpose because I'm British, I'm a gentleman, I believe, and I was brought up with the whole idea of chivalry and courteousness, which means that if you're on a crowded tube train, you do get up and you do give your seat to a lady. You always open the door for a lady, because it creates a sense of consideration of that person's space that they then might consider yours. And those kinds of customs and manners have gone out of the window in the past 30 years or so with, the way culture has gone. And it's, again, led to that terrible imbalance. So to my mind, I think it's critical that we have this discussion, I mean, there's a great musical based upon the ancient play Pygmalion, which was musicalized as My Fair Lady, where a lady from the street is gradually turned into a real lady. It's a classic, absolutely. How ironic is it that 60 years later, the roles are reversed? It's now the man who's coming from the street who now needs to be retaught.
Well, there's something going on. I want you to be able to respond, both you and Frank to respond.
I just want to add something.
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
That I'm certainly no defender of Christianity. I grew up within the brutality of the Catholic Church, which inoculated me against organized religion.
Me too.
Cults and multi-level marketing. But the thing is that all three of the monotheistic religions are equally guilty of what you just stated.
I couldn't agree more. When God becomes a man and does not become, well, let's put it this way. The codices have revealed one startling fact, which is going to really astonish the world, because we've got the smoking gun. There was no God the Father at the beginning, and that's all. They're stating quite explicitly there was God the Father, God the Mother, God the Son, God the Daughter. In other words, a complete divine family.
Right.
And I mean, that's pretty marvelous, actually, because this is talking about family values from the very outset, and the whole idea of God just being a bloke who could do what he likes is a complete nonsense, because actually he had Mrs. God to tell him his place, and I think that's great. I love
I'm
that.
married to Mrs. God, yeah. Well, I want to save that conversation about the codexes, because that's going to be a whole interview unto itself, probably more than one. But that's something we can touch on later. And and Frank's response, I'm wanted to also mention a couple other things. Number one is the UN's World Happiness Report. Now, in 2016, they found that the United States had slipped to the 13th among the happiest countries, which was embarrassing, right? Well, now in
Yeah.
2024, we're 23rd. We're out of the top 20 of the happiest countries in the world. And they also talk about that there's this high index of what am I looking for? Oh, suicides that are happening, and they say mainly by middle-aged men. They say 7 or 8 out of 10 are middle-aged men looking for. This is the last 3 years, I guess, of discomfort. And they're also talking about the decrease in lifespan of men. There's a lot of misdirection among us of how we resolve who we are and how we fit into the world and what we can offer. There's some shame, some guilt, and we're trying to find our way back to a place of balance. Frank's expertise is in the world of recovery, but Frank, what is that? And you deal with people at the lowest part of their life. I mean, they just have reached the worst moment in their lives. They have to recover. They have to come back. And I've had some incredible stories that you've shared with me previously, but what is the path forward? How do you see it?
Well, I think, and I'm no expert, and I'm not married to any insights that I have, given the fact that they've changed over the years, over and over again. But the best answer I have to your question is that all my life I've been promised that if I get the right car, the right girl, the right job, the right number of zeros in my bank account, I will automatically achieve nirvana.
Right.
I think people get to middle age and they realize all of that was absolute horseshit. And now what do you do? And one of the most difficult things for people to do is to engage in meaningful self-reflection. And this comes home to me. I do lately I've been getting more and more involved with hospice work. And the other day I was with a guy, a real nice guy, and he's not long. The hourglass is glued to the table. He's not long for the world. And it was a rather opulent home in Sedona. And his wife was there, who was really, really still very healthy. His daughter was there. He's got another kid. And I'm looking around at all this stuff. They were really good at collecting really tasteful things and beautiful books. And I realized at that moment, the only thing that mattered to this guy were the people around him.
Yeah.
Relationships. And I hear people clamoring all the time about community, but nobody knows how to be a friend. In order to have a community, you got to build friendships. In order to do that, you have to know how to be vulnerable and interact with other people. I don't think it's that complicated at this point in my life. It's, and when people use the term toxic masculinity, behavior is either toxic or it's not. You want to associate it to a gender that's maybe specific. You want to get specific about certain things. Toxic behavior is toxic behavior, and let's face it, it's all around us. And I think, so as far as the question about suicide, it's like I get depressed. I mean, sometimes I wake up and I feel completely useless as a human being, as a man. Things are starting to hurt. I can't lift two 4x8 sheets of plywood and climb 3 flights of stairs and have a cigarette. You know what I mean? I got to acclimate to this new reality. Nothing has trained me for that.
Yeah.
Nothing has trained me for, not having an erection every time a wind blows. I don't have that. I have to, acclimate to this new reality. And there's nothing in society that tells me that aging is not a disease.
Yeah.
They say things.
It's funny you should say that, because in classical mythology, there's really nothing about the aging of the male that's of any value whatsoever. Because all of the heroes are young. They're kind of like, Hollywood gods, etc. Right. But as soon as they enter middle age, that's it. They're clapped out and gone. Bang. I mean, in Jason the Argonauts, does all those wonderful things, has a great time, And then as soon as he hits age 40, he's sitting on the beach under the ruins of the Argo, when suddenly its prow just
Right.
falls down, knocks him on the head, and he's gone.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like they
how
were
about,
really embarrassed by it, you know?
how about Socrates? Hey, man, those are some really good things you said. Hemlock.
Yeah, absolutely. Believe me, I've been looking for the real tasty hemlock for the past couple of years, and one of these days.
Yeah, I knew putting you two together was going to be dangerous, but okay, we'll continue. I want Todd to get in on the
Well,
conversation as well.
I'm happy listening to them, but
Me too.
you raised some important points here. One of the things as an anthropologist is toxic masculinity is not a variable we even consider, because it is so poorly defined in terms of what makes it toxic and how do you define toxic masculinity. You have toxic behavior, you have antisocial behavior, you have pro-social behavior, but the idea that there's something about men in particular that we can define and say, hey, this is toxic, just doesn't work that way. And a lot of times what is toxic in one circumstance is in fact lauded and appreciated in other circumstances. So when we're raising young men, a lot of times, and speaking here as a father, it's not so much saying do this or don't do that, instead saying do this in this circumstance and don't do this in this other circumstance. And training, it becomes a context specific, and sometimes young men make mistakes. That's a part of it all. And through the learning process, they get better and better as time goes on. And so the sacred masculine in terms of the individual is something that's created over time, as opposed to something that is inherent within a person. So that part of socialization is an important part of it. And we see this cross-culturally, where the masculine is in fact valued cross-culturally within all these different cultures. You can't have a functioning society without the masculine as well as the feminine, and both are absolutely essential to a properly structured culture, a properly structured society, which goes back to things like the suicide rate that Paul mentioned there. If the masculine is devalued in total, then that is going to create a society that doesn't work particularly well. And it may work for a little while, but ultimately it's not going to work well for anybody.
May I ask a question? Okay, because all right, because my friend Paul, he has a real knack for putting together some really erudite guys. And at the risk of sounding really pedestrian, what about just being a decent human being?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I'm not
Absolutely.
minimizing or just anything that you're saying, but I think like when I'm a father as well, and I thought, I didn't think about raising a Nobel laureate. I
Mhm.
thought, man, first of all, I wanted him not to be like me because I was crazy as a kid and I had no direction whatsoever. But I thought, my goal was to raise a decent human being
Exactly.
and go from there. And I think that's really simple, and it doesn't require much of an explanation. I don't, am I like oversimplifying this?
I personally laud your view very much indeed, because I think that's absolutely spot on. And we can try and we can be erudite. I mean, frankly, with me, I genuinely feel that the more I know, the less I know.
Yeah,
You,
my
you,
brother.
yeah, absolutely. You remind me of my sister took home her first boyfriend and to introduce to my father. And she said, Simon, this is my father. And Dad said under his breath, yes, the farther the better.
Oh God.
And it's kind of like, because my father felt kind of threatened by the whole thing even then, and you could see the way it was going. This whole idea of toxic masculinity has been media driven, I suspect, because you're not allowed to be the hero anymore, because we're a bit like what's that wonderful Disney thing about the family of superheroes who go into hiding.
The Incredibles.
The Incredibles, that's right. It's a bit like that. We're not needed at the moment, so we're having to kind of take off our uniforms and live humdrum lives because we're being targeted and we've got to be quiet. And yet that's a media driven thing, because actually the role of the male is to, naturally, you call it evolution, whatever, is to defend your family. And why shouldn't we?
I think you're
You can
exactly
do
right.
that without being a mafioso.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When I grew up, whether it was implicit or explicit, my parents came from Italy after World War II in 47. And it was either implicit or explicit that to be a man was to endure as much pain as possible without expressing it, be oppressive to women, never back down, never say you're sorry. You know, all that crap that gets you in the hospital with organ failure by the time you're 45 years old.
Yes, exactly.
You know, so,
Yeah.
but this was the framework with which I was introduced into the world. And it took me 3/4 of my life to unlearn this crap.
Yeah, that is the problem, I have to say. And for me, I've got thyroid disease, and the kind of thyroid disease I've got, I'm in 2% of males who've got this across the planet. So I've got a female disorder largely. And that makes me, and don't get me wrong here, but I am hypersensitive.
You've got a one-liner for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hypersensitive to stuff, and I go through these periods where I get an amazing amount coming out of my brain that I have to lock myself away because I get sensitive to the way things are. And it's appalling, I have to say. I'm a guy who gets hormonal, but don't get me wrong, I don't share all this stuff about, you've just got to, you've got to show your emotions. There's a time and a place to do it.
Yeah, but you're English. You're going to have a hard time, man.
I'm Anglo-Irish. I'll give you that.
May I just comment about that? Because sometimes that happens to me and it freaks me out. But the whole thing is, Emerson said that the longest journey of my life was the journey without distance, the 18 inches between my head and my heart.
Right.
And the ego's greatest disappointment is a heart opening. And it's at those moments that they're so genuine that they're frightening because you're exposed. I don't think that that's actually an anomaly. I think that that's really something that brings you closer to the divinity within yourself, but it's scary. Yeah. It's big, man, and it's unfamiliar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I want to go back to something that David said there about the relationship between men, women, and the family and whatnot. I just posted on chat for anybody who has chat and wants to look at it, a quote from a Dene elder. And he was talking about our elders taught that a man carries a shield in his left arm, protecting his family, his beliefs, his land, and his freedom. The mother carries her cooking utensils in her right hand to represent her shield against hunger, illness, and their adversities. Between the two parents is a great deal of security that is provided to the children from which they can achieve maturity. It is the weak, undisciplined, and immature parent who does not understand that what is required in the role of a parent who leaves the children in darkness, hunger, cold, be ravaged by all manner of affliction. And the point here is that you're absolutely right. There's a balance here, and in each culture, you have to have that proper balance. And so, yes, the men provide security, and that's an important component. The women provide other attributes as well, and including security. But a really well-functioning society includes both of those. And so, it's important to recognize the contributions of both.
I think one of the big mistakes that's been made in the overall argument is the shifting of wisdom between feminine and masculine. We understand the female wisdom, but we don't understand masculine wisdom. It's been done down too much and too often.
Right.
And the problem is that we need to understand it more in context with that overall relationship with society as a whole, let alone the family.
But at the same time, we're not victims. We, as men, we have that responsibility to own that and for that to be expressed. We have to be the representatives of that, be the representatives of this particular type of change that you're talking about. I mean, I want to not be a victim in life. I want to be someone who that participates in that's.
You're damn right. I mean,
change.
I'm if I could say I'm a victim and it's poor me and everything else, but no way. Come on.
Well,
if people do stuff to me, I like it because it means I'm into something.
This conditioning and this imaging that we've cultivated over all these years. I'll give you a really quick example. I had my right hand, I'm left-handed, but my right hand was really, really swollen, and I got to take I forgot progesterone for it. I couldn't open the vial. It hurt. My hand hurt so much, and my girlfriend came over, opened it up, thought absolutely nothing of it, I had a narrative that now I might as well just blow my brains out. I can't open a vial.
Right.
But her is, oh, I just opened a vial. Oh, let me, where's my purse? It went in and out of her head. I had a narrative about it, and I realized nothing happened. Somebody just opened the vial for me. That's all that happened. But in my mind, I had the first part of a screenplay about reasons that would justify my killing myself.
You know, the one of the great thing that I have to say in Ireland that we've actually given to world culture is something which is truly, really, really powerful. And I say this seriously, and I'm about to therefore issue a contradiction, as you can see it coming. I can see it on Frank's face. He's waiting for the contradiction to happen, you know, and that is a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Because in the humor, you've got two opposites, and where they meet is where you see the truth.
Right.
But the truth is inexpressible except through the joke.
Hmm.
And when a woman gets the joke as well, you know you've really hit home.
Right.
And what I'm saying here is that, you know, if we keep these two hands apart and don't let them join, you're going to end up blowing your brains out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Charlie Chaplin said, from a distance, at close up, life is tragic, but from far away, it's pretty damn funny.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. You know, I mean, it's what think about it. Think you see a guy from 10 miles away fall off a wall, and you think it's very funny, you know. But if you see it from 2 yards away, it's pretty painful.
Right.
And that's the issue, isn't it? You know, that's where we are as men symbolically in this present argument about. And I mean, you know, I'm not complaining about the argument. What I'm saying is we're just going through a transitionary period in history and culture where we are located right here, right now, and this is what's going on. And that's what's so curious, is that we are evolving as I speak. But however, we still need a sense of humor to get through it.
Always, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite jokes, I'll tell this to you, Frank. This is great. This is an Irish joke.
I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah. Maggie O'Murphy goes to the doctor. She says, Doctor, I've forgotten to take my contradictory tablets. He said, you're ignorant. She said, that's right, 3 months. You know, now to get the joke, you've got to understand the words and their meanings, okay? And that's the curious thing. We're using words here to understand our conversations and our thoughts. And that is itself a product of wisdom. That's what we've learned over the years. We've become so sensitive to that. Now, one thing I've discovered in my work is that an event happened in deep antiquity where at the Temple of Hathor on Mount Sinai, at Serebit El Kadim, somebody had a vision wherein they finally came up with what we call cursive script. In other words, the ABC, for the first time in history. So instead of writing down hieroglyphs with ideograms, logograms, and all the rest of it, you know, you suddenly had letters that encapsulated all of that in one. And my point being that if you wanted to write a letter to the milkman in hieroglyphics, by the time you've done it, the milk's been delivered, it's turned to cheese, you've got no milk. But with the ABC, you can just do it straight off, boom, there you go. And it totally transformed human communications. But my point is that the development happened inside the temple to the female, Hathor, but the credit was given to a male god.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the other thing, I mean, I just want to tag, it just came to mind, and when I have a thought, I can't make a mental note. It's like carving it on ice. I gotta really say it right away. Is that one of the things I've discovered, you know, that was really hard for me to digest, is the absence, there's no correlation between intelligence and wisdom.
Yes.
That was really hard for me to swallow because I had such a great reverence when I went to university late in life, and I had such a reverence, and I couldn't believe how dopey these people were that knew everything. You know,
Aristotle actually talked about that.
I beg your pardon?
Aristotle actually talked about that. He talked about how to be virtuous, you had to have moral wisdom and you had to have intellectual wisdom, and those both had to go together to actually be truly virtuous. And you could
Interesting.
have intellectual wisdom without the moral wisdom, and that led to
Right.
a terrible situation.
And
Congress.
how interesting the word virtue is actually the Latin word for green.
I was unaware of that.
Hence the green man.
Huh.
Oh, the green man, right.
Okay,
It's
so
also
again,
an
we're talking
organism.
about wisdom.
Going, you know, because essentially what we're talking about, in my view, is really an expansion of consciousness.
Mhm.
You know, that's what we're talking about. I mean, and what I notice is like, you know, like I don't trust those guys that wear their consciousness and spirituality as a uniform.
Mhm.
You know, I don't trust white guys with dreadlocks and hemp woven tunics. You know, I tend not to trust those guys.
Well, Frank, you raise a good point, because within cultures worldwide, but within our culture as well, the sacred masculine is something that's earned. It's not something that's just sort
Right.
of bestowed or given.
And
Or,
not announced.
yeah,
And-
it's
and-
the result of hard work and self-improvement and the development of the skills that cause one to be to embrace the sacred masculine, but also to become the sacred masculine.
And haven't you noticed that people like that are people that you experience really, it's a visceral experience. It's not something they announce like, you know, my name is Dr. So and so, I'm a rheumatologist.
Right.
It's something that they walk in the room, it's like, I want to be next to this person.
Yeah, they're
This person has something that I want to bring into my heart.
Mhm.
And you know, they don't announce it. It's just all of a sudden you feel it. And those people, you know, when I have a reverence for people. When I meet people like that, I feel very blessed because I can see it. I'm at a place in my life where I can actually, I can recognize it, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, it helps me feel like, okay, you know, I'm not as great as I want to be, but I'm not as bad as I was.
and
It's interesting because in the Legend of the Holy Grail, the person who is destined to achieve the Grail is either Percival or Galahad, but both are known as the Holy Fool.
mhm.
Okay, now we have a misunderstanding of what the word fool is now. A
I
fool
agree.
now is somebody who is truly foolish, an idiot, somebody who won't learn. But the actual role of the fool is to actually set out on a path and learn.
Mm.
And again, media is responsible for saying that you know, you get into the media, you're not allowed to make mistakes, you're not allowed to be a faulty human being, and it's pretty terrible actually. It's kind of like the Judeo-Christian idea of you've got to be perfect, but there is no perfection in that vein. We're all foolish because we're all on the path to wisdom.
Well,
I mean, if you look at my own life, I think, my God, you know, you'd blush if you'd seen some of the things I'd done.
Well,
Right.
the tarot, in the tarot card, the fool, he's leaping into the unknown.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
a courageous guy, right?
yeah.
Like you said, he's in the tarot, he's got his eyes closed, he's leaping into the unknown. He's not jumping into the abyss. He's going, you know, he's at the edge of his thinking and his consciousness.
Right.
And he's prepared, and he has the courage to, you know, take that next leap.
But
Well,
isn't it notable, though, that in the tarot and elsewhere, there's no feminine equivalent to the masculine fool?
they know better.
Don't say anything.
But Frank, one of the things you bring up, especially with your focus on working with folk and substance abuse and whatnot. My dad was an alcoholic. He had 30 years sobriety when he passed away. There is this redemptive arc that I think is present in many people's lives, not just men, but is frequently very evident in men, where mistakes are made and then restitution or progress is created from that. Saw that with my father. I'm sure you see it in your own life and the lives of other men that you're working with.
I'm glad you had that experience. That's a very well. First of all, I want to acknowledge you because you had to go through something. You know, he was going through his thing, but that definitely had an effect on you. And so, you know, that says a lot about, you know, your journey, your Joseph Campbell trip,
Yeah.
it's because even though he's clean for 30 years, those first 10, he's still crazy.
Yeah.
He
You know,
is.
it doesn't mean just because you put the drink down, the angels start harmonizing.
No.
There's a really, there's a couple of base camps he's got to go through.
Oh, absolutely.
So I want to acknowledge you for for being willing to go on your own journey along with that.
He was a great father, though. My dad, from his mistakes, he taught me a great deal. And I think that on Father's Day, that is, I think, a central component to being a good father.
Mhm.
We have to give our sons enough room to be the fool, because they have to be the fool. That's just simply part
Right.
of being a man and getting out there and learning how the world works. But what we can do is say, hey, I did that, and don't do it.
Yeah.
That plate is hot. Don't touch it.
Stand on the sidelines with peroxide and bandages.
Exactly. Exactly.
On the sideline, just ready for triage.
Yeah.
And there's that element, and since we're talking about fathers, I know within my own experience that there's different ways that we learn and that we somehow try to go to the next stage beyond what our father could accomplish. But there's the circumstances of young men being drafted, put in the military, going through that entire experience, coming out of that, trying to adapt to a world, all of that kind of stuff. My father was a heavy smoker, plenty of drinking, went into the war, served and never talked about it afterwards, World War II. And so it was a big deal. And this man was such a Marine, and it was so hard for me to relate to him because I was such a sensitive young lad, and how he conducted himself. But he always conducted himself with ethics,
Mhm.
with treating people the right way. He had the right principles, like Frank was talking about. How did he treat the person, the cashier at the grocery store? How did he treat his employees? How did he conducted himself in the right way? It wasn't from going to church. It wasn't from a religious belief. It was from a depth from within himself. And I think as men, many men probably function from that level more so sometimes than the intellectual understanding of the sacred or whatever, that it's just, and they know that they have to protect their family. They have to conduct themselves in the right way and be able to carry forward in a way that has a feeling of an inner respect, an inner guide.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's funny.
I once did a seminar in a prison in Southern California, and it was a place where they housed veterans with felonies. It was just, I think, about 10 of these places around the country, and it was really interesting to work with a group of inmates that were Marines, or various parts of the service. And one of the things, one of the words in recovery, and a lot of them were there for drugs and stuff. And if it wasn't drugs, the drugs are in the through line. So they may have committed a robbery, but why did they commit the robbery, right? So one of the components, one of the words that's used a lot in recovery is surrender, right?
Mhm. Right.
Mhm.
And these guys, they had a real aversion to that because they trained for years, never, not surrendering. So I had to figure out a way, this is like sometimes that the part that you're talking about, the feminine part.
Yeah.
I thought, how am I going to, how can I convey this to these guys without seeming like I'm, full of baloney and just pontificating? And what came to me is I said, you know what, never mind surrender. How about ceasing the argument with reality?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And my point is, like, these guys, they wanted a way, they wanted an avenue towards their own redemption, but
Mhm.
the words got in the way, and
Yeah.
the imaging got in the way. But when you say something like, like, look, man, like ceasing the argument with reality, look around, what's real here? Like, what is your situation right now? And are you prepared to take a step to ascend from that? And so I think there's people that they want to live more than they want to die, but at
Mhm.
one point they get to a place where it's just too much. And I think that's where you talk about the blue zones. You hear about the through line with the blue zones is community. People don't grieve alone. They don't
Yes.
parent alone.
Right.
They don't celebrate alone. They don't eat alone. there's always somebody to intercept a child. You know what I mean? If the parents aren't, there's somebody in the community that there's this organism, and I think that is so sorely lacking. And in the work that I do, the number one problem that I see, aside from drugs and all that, loneliness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's a serious epidemic, and considering that we're hardwired to connect, I think as guys, like sort of how to be, the stoicism and all that. I'm not Marcus Aurelius. I'm Frank Ferrante. I'm just like Dago from New York that just likes to hang around people.
Mhm.
And I think when I noticed that one of the greatest things that helps people towards redemption is when they feel that, not that they fit in, because then you have to compromise a core belief, but where there's a sense of belonging, that if they misstep, there's an avenue for them to redeem that, amend it, and get back to whatever it is. It's really like, how do we do that, man? Considering the intensity of polarity that exists, I'm at a loss. I don't know. So I just do the next right thing in front of me. But if you guys have an answer to that, I'd love to hear it.
I think you're very lucky that you're not Marcus Aurelius, because anybody who could have given
He has
birth
such
to
a nice
Commodus,
voice, though.
anybody who could have given rise to Commodus is seriously in my bad books. I got to tell you,
There'll never be any dead air at our dinner table.
But the thing I wanted to actually raise, and Todd, you'll know more about this as well, is the whole idea, the whole concept of both the difference and the links between the masculine and the feminine. I mean, let's look at the ancient idea of it. I mean, the masculine is, you could say in basic biological terms, is the seed,
right,
that heads towards the egg at the point of conception. Okay, so we are this kind of jumble of compacted ideas, histories, and you name it, heading towards a broad horizon that is completely undefined, but contains something that somehow will connect with us, and its chemical volatility will lead to furtherance of the objective of life and consciousness.
Yeah, we do see these sorts of things that you're talking about. So sometimes in cosmology, for example, in many South American groups, there's this idea of women being associated with the underworld, with the creation, with the transformation of things, men being associated with the upper world, the sun, the energy that allows growth to occur. You can't have growth without both of those being present together. And that's both in a practical sense, men and women have to be together, but it's also in a metaphorical or a cosmological sense, in that both of these powers have to come together to make the world possible, to make the middle world, the world of the here and now, possible. And so it's a very powerful metaphor. When Paul asked me to do this, I spent some time working with some cross-cultural data, trying to figure out what it is that makes a sacred masculine in terms of a practical sense. Because we can talk about it kind of metaphorically and talk about energies and all that stuff, but in terms of different cultures, what is it that cross-culturally corresponds to what we would consider to be the sacred masculine? And here's some stuff, and you all have hit on this, I think, very well, but a good man, a sacred man, a man who has the sacred masculine, cross-culturally has religious authority and is fit within something that is larger than himself. And so he himself is not the sacred masculine. Rather, there's something that he has worked himself into that allows him to be part of the sacred masculine. So it's not something that an individual has. It's actually part of a larger community in some way. You also have some level of leadership that goes along with this. The sacred masculine is associated with trying to help society, culture, however that may be defined, from hunters and gatherers on up to politically complex groups, work and function as a society. And so again, it isn't necessarily, it includes the inward journey, but also includes the outward expression. And both of those are essential to this. It's also sacrificial service. These are men who will go and do things for others in some way. And then there's also controlled strength. The divine masculine, the sacred masculine, has the ability to do wrong, but chooses not to do wrong. And so there's a conscious choice there where it's not a harmless individual. Rather, it's a powerful individual who chooses to do what is right as opposed to doing what is wrong. So along with that is, the potential of actually making mistakes. So the sacred masculine is not all about never making mistakes. It's about striving to do what's right.
That's curious because, again, in ancient religions, of course, the female was always right and the male largely was always wrong. I mean, it's an inversion of the whole Christian thing in a sense, and I find that really fascinating. But this whole idea of there being a difference between the two, and you wonder about what the unifying point is and what defines it. That's what I find so curious, So in social terms, we have a masculine way of doing things, we have a feminine way of doing things. How do we unite the two, and what's the understanding that comes out of it? I'm kind of fascinated by this. I've been married twice. I've now got a Belgian girlfriend. She's much younger than I am, I'm pleased to say. It's getting a wee bit serious. I'm hoping that things will take off, but I'm still trying to, after all these years, I thought I'm in my early 60s, for goodness sake. I'm beginning to fall apart. The glue's working really well, but I'm thinking to myself, perhaps I can apply some of the wisdom I've learned. And frankly, it's just not working. It's just, it's like sort of, I'm still young. I'm still kind of learning the whole thing. And I'm kind of thinking, what's all this about,
Yeah.
I suspect you don't give yourself enough credit.
What's interesting is like you're a young man and you set out to create a career and all that, and you get most of the time you get all that stuff pretty much right.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah.
That love thing, we work on it till the day we die. I mean, I just think I'm starting to get it right at 72. I'm figuring it out just like when there's 4 grains of sand left in the hourglass, I finally figured it out, but I just wanted to get back to what you said. That was so beautifully put. The way you it was almost musical, the way you talked about a way of being. You talked about the ethics and all of that. And what comes to mind, and as you're so familiar with the 12-step thing, every one of those things contributes to you feeling better about yourself. Mm-hmm. And not in a megalomaniacal or narcissistic way. There's one of the things I tell, if I give a talk at a rehab, the last thing I say to people is, do something nice for somebody today and don't get caught. And which exercises a muscle. Because when I did something nice, I wanted it above the fold of the New York Times.
Absolutely.
Great guy it was, and I wanted you to like me. If I can cultivate that muscle from within, right, I become a person that's much nicer to be around. And everything that you talked about, every one of those practices that you talked about, contribute to somebody really just really feeling good about themselves. And I'm at my happiest when I'm not thinking about me. Mm-hmm. And how do I do that? Well, help somebody else.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
I'm with you on that entirely. Yeah, that's why I believe in chivalry, and all of that. You just
right.
Out there and don't expect any clapping when you do something good. Don't expect to be rewarded.
No, because
you just get on and do it, don't you?
St. Matthew said, if you seek your reward here, you'll get it here. But if you wait, you'll get it in heaven, meaning heaven's here in the heart, right? So like if I don't then there's something
that's where I've got the poster written. It says $5,000 wanted. It's in my heart.
Exactly.
Let me introduce you all to a young man I'm very proud of. This is actually my son.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Hi, good to meet.
Only Kai in Sedona.
Yeah. You gonna sing in?
This is my other son, Roy.
Roy, come on in, Roy.
Hi, Roy.
Good.
Yeah, just take a corner of the seat here.
All right,
You're
thank you,
skinny,
much
so am I.
appreciated.
All right. So let's get some youthful perspective. Have you had a chance to listen to what we're talking about?
Yeah, I would like to add one thing to
Somewhat,
the
yeah.
conversation that was just happening. There's a verse in the Bible that a lot of people don't really know what to do with, but do not let the left hand know what your right hand is doing. And I think it's exactly about that, where when you do something nice in a way you shouldn't even be aware of it. You should be good simply for the sake of being
There you
good
go.
and not dwell on it at all.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you're absolutely right there. That's absolutely for sure. You know,
And you guys are right that it's a habit that you cultivate, building off of that. It should be like secondhand nature, where you see a person that needs help, so you help them, almost without, your left hand knowing what your right hand's doing.
well, I again, that you're talking
think
about
the
the foundation
distinction-
bricks of society.
Yeah.
But it's eliminating the distinction between the helper and the helpee. They're the same,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Where it's not a role playing, but they're both exactly the same. The person that's helping and the person that's being helped. There is no distinction.
Yeah, and I know when I was in my darkest times, the way I got out of those was by serving others. That for me has been the single best way that I can repeat to actually help myself out of a hole I've dug for myself.
So we have an 18-year-old just graduated from high school and 21.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Hey, thank you.
21. And so you served in the military and
Yes.
you work in security or
Yes.
and at the university there in Missouri. And so it's good to have and we can sit around, all of us are kind of in a similar age group and we all got our little perspectives of what we see.
We were until 2 minutes ago.
Yeah. And we had no,
Hmm.
yeah. And Todd is the only one in the circle that has boys. So we don't even have that experience of watching what's happening with young men in this day and age and where it's going and what's happening. And I don't know, can you add some kind of insight that you would think that we would want to know? Where are you at? Where are you going? And how can we be better at supporting the next generation or the generation after the generation to help us where the planet's going, what's happening?
So to answer the how can we help young men?
Yeah.
One of the key things that I've been seeing among my peers is that within the public schooling system, not all of it, there are certainly exceptions, but with most of the young men I know, they were not allowed to be boys in school. Things like the zero tolerance policy, so no rough housing, no rough play with each other, being sit down, stay at a desk 8 hours a day, no playing, no exploring, no wandering. And one of the best ways I think we can help the younger generation is to allow boys to be boys. Because if you're never a boy, how can you become a man?
Wow. And you
That's incredible. I mean, that's what I found. I as a young lad, in my pre-teens and teens, I was lucky enough to have parents who were in the Navy, and we went all over the world. I went to Polynesia, Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and I got into situations where, whoa, today it was like you'd be slapped with a writ for so half the things I did.
Yeah.
I was in touch with poisonous animals. I caught poisonous snakes and spiders because I was generally fascinated in these extraordinary and beautiful creatures, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to explore. But today, it's like, oh no, that's not allowed because that's bad for you. But we're guys, and the fact of the matter is, we learn through the experience of these things in a direct way.
Yeah, you gotta burn your hand, or else you shouldn't touch it.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I mean, that's a given, isn't it?
Mm.
And it's tragic that we've kind of become so legalistic about it. And I think also the thing I don't like as well is the fact that you're not allowed to use your imaginations anymore as children. You're just force-fed in a greenhouse environment to pass exams, and then you are become cannon fodder for industry. So, in 100 short years, we've gone from sending our ill-equipped, ill-trained soldiers to the frontline trenches in World War One to doing the same 100 years later, for industry.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to think and do stuff. And I think it's awful. I really do. I think it's really bad. But however, I do think it will turn.
It
I-
has to. This isn't
Yeah.
sustainable. Society needs good young men to protect it and to keep things running. If we don't have that, it just cannot continue. Things have to change.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're facing massive demographic collapse. I mean, you look across the world, you look at China, you look at Europe. In Italy, they're selling houses for £1 in Sicily because they're desperately trying to get people in with families so they can have children because their population's descending like there's no tomorrow. It's the same in France. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey guys, it's time for us to be chaps, to do our stuff and for society to recalibrate, as it were,
Yeah. Absolutely.
These issues, though, these issues are very complex. I mean, it's like you can't look at I don't think it's fair to look at a kid a young guy that just came out of high school, present him with these problems and say, okay, we got to fix this.
Yeah, fix it, would you?
So
yeah.
Socioeconomic thing that has a lot to do with consciousness. People talk about the breakdown of the family. Well, a lot of it has to do with two parents having to work 12 hours a day just to keep the lights on. My daughter says nobody in who's 40, she goes, nobody in her generation expects to own a home. There's a lot of, it's so complex. It's not just young men reclaiming their power. It's really systemic that I think really requires a symbiotic coordination or cooperation with both men and women to see that everybody's getting screwed.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody denies that. I think it's that the problem is that the whole masculine aspect of it has been so hidden or actually buried under the carpet for such a while.
Yeah.
And that's the issue, is we do need to get back to a proper conversation with these issues so we know how to actually go forward. And that is the fundamental issue here.
Well, I would respectfully just say, just counter one thing, and that is getting back to a conversation. We never really had the conversation.
Yeah.
Back to the conversation. People use the word like at one time we were having these really in-depth, courageous conversations. We never had them. At least I missed that day because, I mean, I'd have them around people, with a couple of shots of vodka, and by 3 o'clock in the morning get deeply spiritual. But the conversation that you're referring to, I don't think ever took place.
Yeah.
I would have, well, certainly in my lifetime, it never has. It's only very recently where people start talking about men's issues. I don't remember as a young person hearing that at all.
Yeah.
No, me neither. No, as an old person, I haven't heard it.
Which is why I said it's been swept under the carpet.
Somebody says something.
I feel like a part of the issue is that we don't really know what masculinity is. In the past, you were put in situations where you were expected to know and to learn how to conduct yourself for the situation. You were expected to overcome and learn these things yourself. People not being put in those situations didn't learn it. So a lot of the conversation is around, what is masculinity? Is it money and girls? Is it being religious? Is it serving others? And a lot of people don't know. There's a void being filled by things like, in some cases, internet personalities. And that's really just a big issue, is because is it a political thing? What makes a man masculine is the big thing that's lacking.
That is absolutely brilliant, because when I was your age, young brother, I was supposed to know stuff that nobody ever taught me.
Yeah.
That there was this idea that I was supposed to know all of this stuff, and I didn't have a clue, and I was terrified that somebody was going to find out that I didn't know. But nobody told me, and that's really very, very astute. That's a very astute observation, and I think that's true still today. But I had no idea about anything. I thought women were from another planet. I didn't know how to conduct myself, but I felt that I had to make stuff up, and all of it had to do with my terror of being found out that I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
That's really a very, very, very smart. That's a very, very astute observation.
One of the problems that I've been seeing, so masculinity has been very demonized in pop culture and in the media. And that has in a way erased the cultural memory of what is to be a man. And combined with that, the fatherlessness crisis.
Oh, yeah,
That
yeah.
people are not seeing examples of how to be a man, how to be in proper relationship with a woman and with a family. And with between both of those, men are not learning how to be men, which I think for some is leading to resentment of you didn't teach me this, you're expecting me to know this, and you're demonizing me all at the same time. And it's just a very bad situation we need to get out of.
I must admit that when I hit 18, I was expecting the manual. I thought it'd be a sort of a 2-volume edition, nicely sort of, bound, and I'd open up the page saying, right, you are now a man, and welcome to the real world. And it never actually turned up. And like Frank, I was talking about the fool earlier on. The fool is having to kind of start from the starting line of assumption, and then having to learn that, what is assumption, what is not. So you're kind of like on the pinball machine. You're being thumped by various obstacles to get the point, and you kind of wonder, well, how the hell did I get here? And I have to say, I'm still in that kind of mode myself. I still don't know really, as you so brilliantly said, the question is, what is masculinity? That's the Grail question. Who am I? Who am I? What am I doing here?
Well, and it brings us back to the whole question of initiation, that we know that many of the indigenous cultures, not just indigenous, but cultures around the world, had some sort of initiation.
Yeah.
Brought men into manhood. There was some recognition of that stage. And some of us at our age are still waiting for that initiation. When's that going to happen? Because it didn't happen at age 12, 13, 14, like it normally has in some of these societies. Now we're still struggling on our own to kind of calculate it. But there's something substantial there that's missing.
It's funny you should say that, because actually I kind of went through an initiation in 1995 when I was 33 years of age, when I actually died on the operating table with this
that's an initiation.
thyroid thing. So I had a near-death experience, but I was actually legitimately dead for a good 35 minutes or so. So I had this really profound near-death experience, and I came back completely changed. And what I saw upstairs, for want of a better metaphor, was that I had a choice, and I decided for some bizarre reason to come back. But I came back with a sense of the masculine sense of myself, but wrapped in something completely feminine. It was like I was on the point of unity.
I see.
And it was a feeling of deep and intense love. And that's what really struck me about the whole thing. And so I've been struggling with that ever since. I've been trying to see it here in our material culture. I've been trying to sort of write about it. And it's interesting. You come back down to earth and everything is dual. There's black and white, there's big and large, there's, great and small. You kind of think, gosh, it's all dual. There's no unifying point, in a sense. Or you the best of times you feel like that, but I dare say it's probably not like that.
Well, and then comes also Frank also had that near-death thing from reaching to the very end of the end, where you had to come back, you had to make a decision.
Yeah.
You guys, your father's amazing. I mean, the way you articulate your current experience and where you are today, it's really, when I was your age, you couldn't even send me out for coffee. I would have screwed it up. You guys are great. And,
Same here.
You see, These guys, they had a guide.
Never
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
You could tell they had a guide that really, he had one eye in the stars and he had one foot on the ground.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that. I didn't have that. And I didn't have anybody to guide me through my sexuality. I didn't know how to behave properly with women. I didn't know how to behave properly in a marriage. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. But what I've learned, and I think that you're touching on it, is that, since I'm no longer suffering from testosterone poisoning,
Hmm.
I look at relationships so much differently and the world very differently because, there's not this crazy unidentifiable force driving me. And I get the chance of actually being an observer,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, a compassionate observer at times when I'm at my best, but an observer. And the things that I see of that are of value are very different. But these guys, they got a shot. The language, like I didn't have their language until I was 50. The connection, between the intellect and the heart. That's amazing that they already have the groundwork for that. I didn't really have that till I was in my late 40s or 50s. And even then it was suspect, but it takes time for a fruit to ripen, till it's ready to fall off the vine. And it just takes time. And I think it seems as though what I've been training for all my life, unbeknownst to me, was to be an elder.
Exactly.
Well, one of the places, responding to what you said earlier, that I've been very blessed in two ways. One was dad.
What
He's
a great thing to say. What a beautiful thing to say.
he set me up to be able to handle the world as it was. The second thing that was very unique to me was boot camp. I had medical issues, very severe medical issues. I spent several months on the edge of death throughout the process. It was extremely painful. I bit off more than I could chew. However, that gave me a very good base for being able to launch into understanding the world, and it would not have been possible without dad. And I think that makes me very unique in the sense that I did have that how'd you word it? The
Sacred masculine
or
what?
the initiation into manhood.
Yeah.
Now
Near-death experience.
yeah, I bit it off more than I could chew with boot camp.
Mm.
But I did have that, and it's something that most people don't have.
Well, to Roy, what do you think? When we talk about the term sacred masculine, how does that apply? How do you understand it? And how could you integrate that into your life?
So I understand the sacred masculine to be an active supporting force, where it's confusing because you can have both the sacred masculine and divine feminine sort of doing the same functions, but fundamentally I see the masculine as the active force that does things. So you can think about in the Wild West, it was the men who were doing everything, being bandits, sheriffs, stealing, making money, ranching, and whatnot. Then you had the sacred feminine, or the divine feminine, which gave a form to that. And you see in cases where you have a lot of men but no femininity, it falls into a sense of chaos, where there is not the women to civilize the men. And at the same time, if you had a society of just women, there would be issues because of that, but the opposite ones. So to me, I see the divine masculine as an active force, then the divine feminine gives form to that, where the man strives and provides for the woman.
And what about the left brain, right brain structure of human culture? Because I'm an Irishman and I'm left-handed like Frank, and I'm very aware, particularly recently, of a very, very great difference in my thinking to the intellectual field in which I work, which is within academia as an academic, in the sense that I don't actually have the ability to think as an academic does in the modern sense of the word, because I don't think in a linear way, because I don't believe that life is linear.
Yeah.
Okay, and the feminine surely is not linear in that same sense.
I think you raise a very interesting point. So looking at some examples cross-culturally, there are these things that are called microloans, and these institutions that have been set up around the world to try to help alleviate poverty and help increase uh, financial prosperity and whatnot. And what they have found consistently across cultures, and it doesn't always work, but there are different strategies that seem to work with males and with females. And so, kind of going back to what Roy was saying, a lot of times with the males, there is the situation where males will form themselves into groups and actually have conflict between the various groups, and they're hierarchically structured, which is actually what Basil was saying. But so you give a loan. One thing they do with the females is they'll give a group of women a loan, and all of them are equally responsible for it, and they actually band together and they help each other out, and it works very well in general, on average, for most, in most cases, not always, but in most cases. And so what will happen is that they'll give what we would consider to be a small loan, $2,000 or something like that, to a group of 20 women. They'll each have $100, and they'll go and they'll set up their own business. And if one of them gets sick or one of them is pregnant or whatnot, they'll actually band together and help pay that person's portion of the loan. And so one of the documentaries I showed to my students in my class, they actually have a dog sale to help cover the loan of one of the women who's pregnant and is unable to work, and this will help her business and help her during that transition. And it's a great way for the women to come together and to support each other. Now they tried the same thing with men, and the men are like, "Why would I want to pay somebody else's loan? Let them pay it themselves." But when they give money to the men, what the men do is they'll go and they'll buy an outboard motor. They'll put it on a boat, and then they'll be much more effective fishermen. And then they'll go and they'll form a business with somebody who's in charge of the boat and the other one's working. And they'll actually create a business where they're working together, but it's hierarchically organized and it's producing money for everybody. So there's cooperation there. But the idea of holding a hot dog sale to help somebody isn't part of the framework they use. And so what we see here is this uh, going back to your point there about right brain, left brain, we see cooperation, but we see the organization, the cooperation occurring in different ways and different scales. With the women, they're not organizing themselves hierarchically, but they're still helping each other out. With the men, they're organizing themselves hierarchically, and each male is better to able to feed his family and take care of himself and take care of his family and secure economic prosperity for the folks he cares about. But they're organizing themselves fundamentally different, which I think is the point that Roy was kind of making there. You put a whole bunch of men there, and you get outlaws, and you get the cattlemen, and you get all these different groups, and they're sometimes fighting with each other, and sometimes cooperating, but they're structured in a way that I remember there's an old adage about how women help civilize the West. It was when you started getting women in schools and all that other stuff that you started actually getting law and order, and things were, you started having the formation of communities as opposed to the formation of these different groups who sometimes were working with each other and sometimes they weren't, and sometimes they were fighting, and sometimes guys are going off on their own and whatnot.
Yeah.
You've just described the entirety of Irish history, which was itself based around the whole idea of the feminine, because up until even deep into Christian times, it was actually a matriarchal based organization.
Yeah.
I believe to a large extent it still is, actually. And that's what's so interesting about the Irish compared to the rest of Europe. Europe's gone very, if I dare say, masculine because of Catholicism, etc. But the Catholicism in Ireland is still very, very matriarchal in that sense. It's fascinating, but the problem is that sometimes the matriarchal can be really overbearing. My mother was Irish. She was matriarchal. She was very overbearing, and we had a terrible relationship because I felt I was forever trying to break out of the egg,
Yeah.
Well, let's not forget Margaret Thatcher, but there was also
or Nancy Reagan.
Exactly. I'm sure they were lovers. To your dad's point, in 2008, during the global financial crisis. One of the few banks that continued to thrive in spite of the financial madness was there were a couple of banks in Iceland that were run by women.
Ah, okay.
And they were the only ones, because when they managed their investments very pragmatically and weren't hormonally fueled with the courage of having other people's money. And these banks actually thrived because they did the exact opposite of what the men in the banks were doing, which was very irresponsible and reckless. And so, there is definitely there's a lot of evidence to what your father said.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to thank you two for joining us and being a part of the discussion. I mean, an idea of being able to have the youth, and also on Father's Day, having the son-father relationship being expressed. You didn't get to tell your father how great he is.
Hey, Dad, you've been an amazing father, and you've trained me well, taught me well, and I'm smart. I know about stuff. And that wouldn't be the case if I was raised in a different environment.
Well, thank you both. I want to take some other questions and comments before we end today, the last couple of minutes, but yeah, so I'll have Todd come back and head into, yeah. So I appreciate your sharing with us. I'm gonna, who wants to go first? I wanted to also have Brian Tucker get involved, because he always has some very insightful ideas. Brian, would you please jump in the conversation?
Well, it's a very lively discussion when we get a group of men together in this way with the women. Certainly good things come from that dialogue. And I find myself listening to this, and like for me, an aspect that I become aware of is the element of the wounding that happens to us as men, that we don't like to talk about it, but there is a wounding aspect to masculinity from which we are healing for much of our lives. I see it. I saw it as a child when, our family was a military family as well. And what did they do? What they wanted us to play with army men and guns. But the reality was that violence being taught to us wasn't really going to help us on our journey towards healing as men. Perpetuating violence and wounding others wasn't going to be the way. So I find myself listening and wanting to know if we as men are willing to sort of look at our own wounds,
right,
as a vehicle to help us understand this dialogue between the sacred masculine and the divine feminine. It's an archetypal dialogue, right? And there's so much in between. There's so many aspects, so many other archetypes. We aren't even talking about gender fluidity. We're not really talking about what it means to be truly inclusive as men and having a unified perspective. We and Frank and others, I believe Basil talked about that transformative aspect of the masculine. What are the healthy aspects of masculinity that we strive for? I think about my cousin was just visiting, and he grew up around Superman, and that was his idol. And I was thinking about the problem with Superman in relation to women is that, did Superman really allow there to be a superwoman? Or did the woman need to become like a Lois Lane? What does it mean for a Superman to work in a world where there are superwomen? Do we all need to be in that kind of archetype of the super whatever? I think we're also, as men, we're struggling to find new role models, new archetypes, and to confront what I believe to be the wounding that comes to us. And I believe women have their own form of wounding as well. What is the unique wounding that happens to us as men that we are also healing from? That will make the world a better place, because we see evidence of wounded men hurting others in the process. So I just wanted to offer that perspective.
I kind of look at that from the perspective of my work in Christianity. What the whole Superman thing is basically Christianity upgraded to the 20th, 21st centuries, frankly. I mean, that was made very clear by Zack Snyder in the recent Superman films. You're looking at Superman as a kind of a repackaging of Christ. But if you look at the real terms of what Christianity really is from the older documentation, it's fairly obvious that the feminine is hidden. It's an underground stream. And I've often thought about this. I kind of, when I was a young man, I was outraged by the whole thing. and thought, yeah, it should be out there. But kind of like the more I kind of thought about it in historical perspective, I thought, well, perhaps the real power of the feminine is that it is hidden. Robert Graves wrote a fantastically famous and brilliant novel called I, Claudius. And the first paragraph contains a line that I would have paid $50 million to write. He turns around and says, he talks about the Emperor Augustus, and then he says, in summary, he says, Augustus ruled the world, but Livia ruled Augustus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And that kind of like tells me, whoa, that just sums it all up really nicely. That shows you where the wound is and how the potential there is to be healed, because, you know, it's the same in the church. The church is ruled by the Queen of Heaven, not by God. You know, it's certainly in the Catholic sense, not so much in the Protestant sense, but what you know, what we've got here is a hidden feminine. And I mean, you see it in the three great religions. As Frank said, they're not really given a serious role on the exterior. I don't know what it's like on the interior. I can't say I'm an expert, you know. Do we want a vocal feminism and a vocal masculinism? That's perhaps the next debate. I've no idea. I mean, you know, I'm still learning. I'm a junior on this circuit.
Well, and you know, Brian, you bring up such an important part of the discussion. Of course, we understand the world that we live in today, where we've evolved to the point of understand gender fluidity. We know that in the native cultures, they talked about the two spirits, that third element of each. So I guess for me, it's sort of like today I wanted to have an opportunity to help give some guidance to those who associate themselves with being male, and you know, if you look at the screen, I mean, we're looking at a bunch of white men having a discussion, which is always dangerous in most people's eyes. But the reality is we want to be white men that want to be part of the change. We don't want to be part of the old guard. We want to be part of the healing that needs to take place. We want to be part of the conversation for this transformation to happen. So, you know, we were the ones that were driving the bus, and they took our driver's license away. They said, you guys, you're not good drivers. We're taking control.
Hey, they didn't take the driver's license. They took the steering wheel.
Well, that's okay. It gets us time. Go ahead, Frank.
Before we go off, I just want to say, I just want to, you know, I just want to respond to, you know, like David's unbelievably area. David's like got helium, and I'm the man on the street.
That's why I got you both here.
And I really love that. I just love this. So I just wanted to answer, you know, the question. One of the words that came up a couple of times was unique, and unique wounding. And I think in terms of, I've reflected a lot on my father was born in Sicily in 1911 and went through all of that stuff that was going on in the 20th century in Europe, the incredible poverty, Mussolini, Hitler, the bombings, the deprivation. My mother used to say the good Germans used to leave us the peels of the onions to eat. That level of deprivation. And I think ancestrally, the suffering has been continuous. I don't think my suffering is unique to anybody else's. I don't think that there is a uniqueness to the suffering. I mean, you go all the way back to Gilgamesh. I'm trying to impress David right now. All the way back to Gilgamesh, right? I mean, the struggle has been the same with the Sumerians, the Romans, the Greeks, the French. I mean, you know, like, what am I going to say that Bob Dylan, the Beatles, and the Sumerians and Shakespeare haven't said already? I don't think there's anything unique. I think it's the courage of stepping into another level of consciousness that requires an assessment of what we've done, amending what we've done to the best we can, and then carrying on. You know, I think whenever the word unique comes into the conversation, it immediately creates separation. And I think that one of the things that would serve us as a race of people is language that fosters connection. You know, I went to a seminar. This guy was charging $1,000 for a seminar. The first thing he says, you do realize we are in a war between good and evil. If I had an egg, I would have thrown it at him. You know, like as if this is a new thing. Since we left the caves and threw rocks at each other, that's been the battle cry.
Mhm.
I think there's nothing unique about me. There's nothing special about me. I suffered more than some, less than others. What am I going to do about it? And can I keep my heart open?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I said to you, the sense of humor is it's a seriously good thing to have as a guy, because it keeps us humble, it keeps us quiet, and it teaches us to kind of just be guys, you know, and that's the best we can do, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. Frank
I mean-
holds that position of always being the trickster in the group. It keeps us always laughing and keeps us looking.
I mean, look at the faces we make when we're making love. How could you not laugh at that?
Exactly. As I said to a lady a couple of days ago, will you shut up for Christ's sakes? I'm trying to be humble.
Yes, I'm working on my humility.
We're losing it. Brian, did you have a final
Oh,
comment?
that's good. Thank you. That's good.
Brian,
leave
you
room
always
for
have
others
so
to
much
speak.
to add.
Thank you.
I'm appreciative of Brian's work. He's the chair of our committee on global collective consciousness, and he's doing all kinds of programs reaching out to organizations around the world that have similar visions and missions, and saying we need to connect. And I appreciate that about Brian very much. Okay, and then I wanted to also go up here to the brother-in-law. Is right here. There he is.
I just want to introduce my brother-in-law. He has raised just amazing children, and they're in the same age group as Todd and my children. And he's a father, and I want to say Happy Father's Day to him, because I love my niece and nephew with all my heart, and he's been the best brother-in-law and a really good male figure. So, and Happy Father's Day, everyone, because I think it's about the sacred masculinity, and I'm leaving now.
There's something I said.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Laura and Paul so much for letting us join them for this weekend with Chris and Todd as they came. Chris and Todd and their family. We appreciate it so much. It's great being with family and such. And it's a great, fantastic and great conversation. This being together ties into so much of this. I have a couple thoughts just kind of share. So many great points. Some of them are kind of carry on from what Frank said. The struggle is not unique, right? This has been going on for so long, and there's so much of the interesting thing is we all have, I don't know, maybe not we all, there's some people maybe are, I don't know if narcissistic or whatever, but they have this inferiority complex who like, they're going to figure me out at some point. They don't know anything, right? But part of it is, we start out as kids and don't know much, and as we get older, it's kind of the funny thing about knowledge is, either a little bit to where you think you know everything, and then when you learn more, you realize you don't know much at all.
Right.
It's kind of my work. We use Excel, and when for hiring somebody, and I ask them how well they know Excel. If they say they know it well, I know they don't know it at all, or they know very little of it, right? And they're just dangerous. And but if they realize that there's so much they don't know, then I know they understand. Or I can have a concept that they know a little bit, and I know that they say they don't know very much of it. And it's kind of like so what is the masculinity and such, and just to add a few points, not to say that I know anything different or better than any of the rest of this fantastic conversation, but it's all part of this balance, right? The feminine, the tools that the feminine brings, and the tools that the masculine brings. Talking about the different, hey, well, the women would help take care of each other, the men would make sure, sort of things, and it's not these hard and fast rules, but it is, but this comes into this balance of masculinity and femininity, and I think part of it is, and then this kind of comes up, like, what is this masculinity? And I kind of think a little bit of it is instill having the confidence. Talking about like I think it was Frank that said, I didn't know to go to Starbucks and what to do. I messed it up, right? But I think part of it is getting to the point where you have confidence to be able to make mistakes, to be able to learn, and to be able to build, and not necessarily build buildings, but build, and not necessarily build stuff, but to build on what we have, or build, and it's kind of like the women, to some degree, the femininity part, takes care of the family in a sense. And then the men, are in a sense are builders, right? But you got to be able to have the confidence to learn and build. And you talked about like what's happened and where do we go from here? How do we improve this? And there's several things that have gotten to, and to some degree, like I said, the struggle is not unique. This is, probably thousands of years ago, people were like, men were probably like, hey, well, what do we do or whatever, right? To some degree, right? It's always kind of this ebb and flow of this. But, how did we get here? And I think there's multiple factors talking about the breakdown of the family. And just as Basil and Roy pointed out, their dad was a fantastic role model and educator in being a male and being able to take care of and learning and having confidence and sort of thing. And also before, people used to hunt. My dad was a hunter, and he'd get together with guys and they'd go hunting, right? And it was just this guys would go off and have these meetings with just guys that, in a sense, right? But it was hunting, camping and hunting. And people would play, and then people play golf, and women play golf, but a lot of guys play golf, and I'm not a golfer, but that was another time when guys would get together and discuss about guy issues or problems and learn and share from each other. Golf has gone down, I've learned, which was surprising me. So people aren't getting together in that sense. And then so, and I think one of them said, I don't know if it was Frank or one of the other gentlemen, about about doing good things for other people, right? And I think it's easy for men to be afraid to get together with other men, but and as becoming an elder, to be able to find venues to be able to share our knowledge with younger people, right? And to not be afraid to. So
Can I quote something?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
That will actually, I think, sums up the whole thing. I'm using it for a novel I'm writing at the moment, a black comedy. But I'm just going to give you the quote, and you'll know who it's by. But I think it sums up our conversation so aptly that actually I'm gonna say it now. There are the known knowns. These are the things that we know that we know. There are the known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we know we don't know.
Right.
Then there are things that you knew that you know that you now know that you know you don't know.
Exactly. Makes sense to me.
That was Donald Rumsfeld,
Yeah.
gentlemen.
Yeah.
And I think it sums up us perfectly.
Well, I'm going to add Tony Hull into the conversation. He has his hand up as well. Tony, jump in.
Okay, hi. This has been a magnificent discussion. I enjoyed what everybody has had to say here. It's very, very special and has a very interesting rhythm to it. One of the great questions which seems to come up in many people's comments today is, what is the masculine? And how can we even have a conversation if we can't say what the masculine is? Now, this is something I had to discover for myself. I grew up, my mother and father were divorced when I was 2. I was brought up by a mother and grandmother. And when I was 7, I was pronounced the man of the family with obviously no knowledge of that. And I had to learn the hard way what that was. But what is the masculine? And then in all sorts of environments, even on this forum, we hear discussions of the divine feminine and the toxic masculine. Right. And I want to kind of scream and respond sometimes, but that probably would not be pretty. I have to say that without exception, the 4 most horrible things that have been done to me are all by women, and really horrible things. So, I want to barf when I hear that. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. But I don't want to be reactive, but it's very difficult to have this conversation. And yet these terms come up even in polite company, even at the parties I give. And maybe I should block them. I don't know. But what do we do in this transition time? And I agree that probably things are going to change, but what do we do in this transition so that we do not become what typically happens, where people scream extreme examples from either side at each other?
Yeah, the duality thing never wins. I mean, it's just a never-ending conversation that will never end. And we're all human beings. We're all on the same path together. So when we start invoking the term divine feminineness, all women are the same, or the divine masculine, I mean, it's just simply talking about a principle, in my mind, at least a principle that is something that we would like to achieve. I'd like to recognize that there is that element to femininity that should be recognized, and there's an element to masculinity that we should recognize. But I do agree with you, Tony, that sometimes there's absolutes being spoken, and those absolutes are cringeworthy many times.
At the
We,
end of
we,
the
we
day,
never hear, we never hear the divine masculine and the toxic feminine.
Well,
Yeah,
I'd like to respond to you. There was a time like during, well, let's say a divorce or whatever that I was going through, and man, I was really not nice about what I would say about women. And what's helped me in my life, is when I got to this place where I looked at my part, not my fault, but what was my part in what happened? And there was always something about what I did that contributed to the outcome of that situation. And sometimes that was really hard to look at because it just was. And for me, and then there's a term that I really love called reticular activation. And reticular activation simply explained is like, if you don't know what kind of car you want to buy, you don't know. But if you decide I'm going to get an Audi, next thing you know, all you see are Audis.
Right.
When I was in that consciousness of my residual resentment for what happened, whether it was my mother or my wife or my girlfriend, all I saw was that frequency. Wherever I looked, all relationships sucked. And or I idealized them until I started looking at what my part was. Not my fault, because my fault inhibits me from doing anything because I get like into this penance victim thing. But what was my part? What role did I play in that situation? Because I was always the common denominator.
My real question is about the dialogue. What do we do when we hear these conversations where people go on and on about the divine feminine and the wonderful guidance from the grandmothers and so many other idioms, and nobody talks about men? Do we just listen patiently, or do we say,
when I'm in my lower vibration?
So you don't take advice from Frank.
So what I'm going to say is that the first step, I think, is for us to recognize that people are people. There is a such thing as both divine masculinity and the divine feminine. There's also toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. Because at the end of the day, these are forces or traits that exist. I guess you could say outside of people if you want to get really spiritual. But these are ideas and descriptives that we have. The big thing that I'm trying to say is that people are people, and whenever we separate these ideas from people, which themselves are a duality, is where we get lost.
I love what you're saying, but I think I would be thrown out of most parties. And I told you, if I mentioned the divine masculine with a toxic feminine,
Yeah.
it's like not allowed. And yet the dialogue is very important. So I totally agree with you on that. But how do we have the conversation?
I have to tell you, Tony, I'm writing a comic novel at the moment, and I have a discussion going on between a man and his wife, and the man says to the wife, "A woman's place is in the mind," and her riposte is, "That's why you're mad about us." That's the argument, isn't it? I mean, you just can't win. You've got to accept it. You're a winner in minority, not in majority. And that's the role of the masculine, in a sense, is to provide that identity to the opposite. And in the opposite sense of the acceptance of her identity, you find your own.
Yeah.
That's why the black widow spider eats her male partner.
Toxic behavior is just toxic behavior. I mean, if a woman is a bank robber and a man is a bank robber, they're both bank robbers and they're going to get indicted for the same crime. I think again, these distinctions can contribute again to another separation. Toxic behavior is is hurtful.
I
Toxic,
totally agree.
toxic, hurtful behavior is hurtful behavior. So whether it has a vagina or whether it has a penis, it's hurtful behavior.
Yeah.
That's the point that I was trying to get across. How can men and women be bad, but how can men and women be good?
Yeah.
How is it that people can overcome the issues or things that are holding them back?
Beautiful.
And if we don't have an idea of what goodness is, there's no use in knowing what evil is either, because evil or bad and toxic is defined by what's good and just.
I have to be honest with you. I think evil is massively underrated.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is the fact that a lot of people say evil, but they don't actually understand what it is.
Right.
Because, you know, the problem is that being good is a moral construct of the West,
Okay.
mostly of Judeo-Christianity. And we have to look at this in a seriously different way, because I think you'll find if you look at the book of Job in the Old Testament, good and evil are actually the same side. Sorry, they're two sides of the same coin.
Right.
Okay. And in Egyptian mythology, evil is a completely negative construct. You've got two twins in Egyptian mythology. You've got Osiris and Set. Osiris is the good god. Set's the not so good god. Actually, he's not the god of evil, as is so often mistakenly said, because in the boat of millions of years that goes round the sun, where the great god Ra is enthroned, Ra, in order to actually, you know, as the sun god, to rise in the morning, has to overcome the serpent of chaos, which is the true evil, the breakdown of order in a way that we can never know. And curiously, at the prow, the god who actually overcomes that serpent, you'd think would be Osiris, who is the hero god. But no, it's his wicked and ignorant brother, Set, who spears the serpent and allows the sun to rise. And at that moment, Set becomes his brother, the good god, which is a lesson for us chaps, because it means that all the mistakes we make can be alchemized into something in a much higher state. But we must be very careful how we use the word evil, because evil is too often associated with masculinity. But we don't understand what masculinity really is, and actually I don't think we get what evil really is either, because it's more than just a simple breakdown of order. We're talking here about entropic chaos, and it's the one impossible thing that we as humans and in our society cannot understand. We overuse this word evil, and in doing so, we condemn others to the seventh level of hell, whereas in fact, actually, that's totally unnecessary.
Well, Tony, I didn't quite answer your question completely, but I get to your, I understand your question. Yeah. So I think we did that navigate.
This is a great discussion, and I see that there's several other questions here, so I'll get off, and thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Tony.
Yes, and then we're going to also go to Ray Harris. Ray was waving at the screen here. I just saw him a second ago. Hello, Ray.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Ray is a proud father. He just had his 50th wedding anniversary. I know Ray very well.
Hi, Ray.
Father's Day.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think this is great. I mean, it's been 2 hours of enlightening get together. But I think one of the things we glanced over is, what about the kids that grow up without a father?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a big void there, but it's not an endless thing. It's you end up learning things differently. And as our guests from our host sons,
oh yeah,
he said he learned things when he went in the military, and the same thing happened to me. I went in the Air Force. I learned discipline, and then it changed my life completely. And then I met a beautiful woman, and she changed my life. And we had a great partnership. We have 2 beautiful kids, and we have given back. We help others. because we were successful in life. And so things can be changed if you have the right mindset.
Right.
And fortunately, the mindset worked out great for me, even though I never had a father figure at home. And it's the discipline of using your mind, read a lot, listen to the person that you're living with, see if you can get along, and convey those things to your children. And our children are very successful too. So
Thank you, Ray. Yeah.
For me, most of the people that I went to school with did not have fathers at all. I was one of the very weird ones for having a father at home. And some of them were absolutely able to make it out of that. That was typically through things like Boy Scouts or sports, where they had coaches and a form of discipline. And I saw a number of
Mentors.
guys in the military who didn't have fathers that were able to recover from that through the military with the same concept. But it requires the a respected male to help them learn these skills.
And you're
'Cause
at the
they
top of
think-
the hour, and we have to, Paul, you have to have as true feminine goddess tradition. We girls need the last word, and we want to congratulate you all on really a fascinating conversation. This has been so enlightening to really hear the heart and souls of the men that we love and live with and celebrate. So I want to turn it over to Chris, because I know you're winding up.
Oh, I
So-
just want to thank everyone for
Thank you,
this
Ray.
enlightening. This is absolutely fabulous. But one of the things I want to do is a shout out to my husband Todd and a shout out to my brother-in-law Dion. These men are excellent. When we had children, my sister's next to my brother-in-law, my husband and this husband jumps in, do dishes, vacuum clean, and change poopy diapers. They always jumped in. They're always front and center. They were always doing, there was in our families no division between male and female. It was what needed to be done, and the guys would do it. I mean, both of our husbands cook, clean, do everything they can to
I'm a
help us.
witness.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And we have two fabulous cooks and two fabulous housekeepers. Again, this is a case where they have that duality within them, but the service and helping to make the world a better place. They start this at home. They do a lot of volunteer work. They're helping community. My sister and I have been very blessed with the most amazing husbands. And I thank each and every one of you males for your wonderful voices. I've learned so much from you all. So thank you.
This has been an enjoyable couple of hours, and I just want to add to this that
Oops.
the nuclear family, you're anthropologists, you and Todd. You know that it used to be that you were raised with all the generations around you. And so whether the father was absent due to whatever circumstances, you had plenty of male figures, uncles, brothers, elders, grandfathers. So this is unusual in most society. So we need to take those extra steps and support one another. I just also want to say, Paul, it's been so fun to see you, because I know you've been pining for the men's conclave that you used to hold, where
We need
men
to
got
do it.
together without the women present, and that vulnerability and that wisdom shone through. I only heard about it after the fact, but it seemed like you compressed an entire men's conclave into 2 hours. But I want to just add an elder's wise words to this, especially appropriate for Father's Days. And he writes and sings, "You fathers and you mothers, be good to one another. Please try to raise your children right. Don't let the darkness take them. Don't make them feel forsaken. Just lead them safely to the light. Willie Nelson, live forever."
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that.
Let me close it up here. I want to just say that, Laura is right. That was part of my inspiration. When I first took over the directorship of this institute, that following year, I set up a men's conclave workshop gathering, because it always had been, the entire institute has been so feminine. Very few men. I was like the only guy at most of the activities. And so I wanted to bring that energy in. And we had for like 5 years, we had some of the most amazing experiences of being able to have that safety net of conversation. With the world shifting and changing, it's become less politically correct to talk about a men's group like that, but it was something that really played a role. So today was sort of like a healing moment. And though we've expanded our definition of what a man is since those days, and that we've expanded the whole idea of what a gender role is and all of that stuff, one thing that's really important that we maintain, and that's love for each other, that we maintain and break down some of this duality of thinking that seems to be so prominent in our culture, politically, environmentally, everywhere. There's always these two sides that are clashing. And it's a chance for us maybe to reach across the aisle and heal. You know, we want to be able to have something where we can grow together. We can have these conversations. Not everybody has to participate in every conversation. Not everybody wants to agree with what's being said. But gosh, what an honor it was today to let Frank go off and let David go off and then have Todd come in and throw the anthropology at the conversation, and then all of your comments, and then having these two bright young men jump in and give us perspectives that we wouldn't have heard otherwise. So with all that said, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to turn and ask everybody to unmute their mics. And you really should applaud these men, these young men specifically, but also all these conversations and all these guests. So go ahead and speak up and say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So
Thank you.
great. Thank you so much.
Hear your voices.
Thank you all. Very much
Frank and
enjoyed.
David,
Wonderful program.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank all of
Yeah.
us.
thank everyone else for.
We're gonna
speaking.
start
It
a
was
podcast called Crosstalk between Frank and David.
Oh, that'd be great.
I
Ooh,
look forward to
please
that.
do.
We
Yes,
talk
yes,
about-
yes.
We talk about
Yes,
people
yes,
that
yes.
don't agree with us. I never learned anything from people that agreed with me.
I thoroughly agree. Absolutely. There we go. You're not learning anything now.
And on that note, thank you all. Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to
Enjoy
do
it, guys, and thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Dad a hug if your dad's around. Love to you all.
I wish I was there, but
Say goodnight, Dad.